Help us demystify what we mean by a career in international law. We understand what careers in municipal law might be, whether it be practice or academia or law firm, but what is or what are careers in international law?
So broadly, whatever aspects of a career, kinds of types of jobs you can have as a domestic lawyer, you can have almost the same thing as an international lawyer.
Welcome to another episode of Justify. International law, which we've been discussing through the course of this season, is often seen as an elite, inaccessible career path. It's limited to top diplomats, maybe some international relations experts, strategic analysts, and a few other chosen people. But with globalization, transnational disputes, climate negotiations, international arbitration, and a range of matters in which India particularly finds itself implicated, the field is actually far more accessible than imagined. To help us demystify what it takes to build a career in international law in all its facets, we are joined by Dr. Rukmini Das, an academic with a focus on international commercial law and investment arbitration, though not limited to these two subjects. Her career path is a model for young Indian lawyers navigating both academia and practice in global legal spaces, particularly because a small but important pit stop in her journey was being part of the founding team at the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy on the first day that Vidhi started operations. Rukmini, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. Welcome to Justify.
Thank you so much, Arghya. Really, one of the reasons that I was very happy to accept this invitation is that I cannot say no to any of the founders of Vidhi, even though, as you said, it was a small part of my career so far, my short career so far. That almost 1 year I spent in Vidhi was very, very enriching, and I had so much fun, learned so much. And yes, the reason why I had to move away from Vidhi, one was the PhD in international law that I started right after, and because Vidhi does an array of things, a small aspect of it is international law, I wanted to get more into international law, which I then did. So I'm
And
also
we are incredibly proud of what you've managed to do because Rukmini's gone on to far bigger and better things after her time at Vidhi. She's currently a lecturer and researcher at the Geneva Center for International Dispute Settlement. She teaches on the master's program, which is jointly offered by the Graduate Institute and the University of Geneva. She teaches various facets of international dispute resolution. Her expertise spans international law, including dispute settlement, and she's also served at guest faculty in a number of places and has a number of laurels to her credit, which are too numerous to mention here. So I will not do that and jump straight in to the main topic of discussion, which is help us demystify what we mean by a career in international law. We understand what careers in municipal law might be, whether it be practice or academia or law firm, but what is or what are careers in international law?
Argo, you almost answered the question yourself. You can draw parallels with municipal or domestic law, pretty much what you said, law firm, academia, practice. I'll add to that in-house, and I'll give an example of what in-house means in international law. So broadly, whatever aspects of a career, kinds of types of jobs you can have as a domestic lawyer, you can have almost the same thing as an international lawyer. For example, there is practice. You can act as a litigator in international disputes. Then, of course, law firms, and that's related to practice. You can work, and there are so many law firms which have departments that do international dispute settlement. Then by in-house practice, I mean, you can work at, say you're working at the United Nations or an organization of that type. And if you're working, say in-house lawyers work on the law, they protect the company and the work on the law related to the company. So lawyers working in the UN some of them could also be working as lawyers which work on international organization law and disputes within the UN, things like that. So they are kind of like in-house counsel for UN. There are, of course, other kinds of lawyers who also work in the UN, which I can come back to. And there's also, of course, academia, the path that I'm on currently. So
So
I
let's
may have
break
missed
each
some,
of
but
these
yeah,
down. This is
yes,
very helpful to begin. Let's take each of these one by one. Okay, so let's start with practice. You said that one can be an international litigator litigating in international law. How does one go about doing that? What is it like? We know that if you in domestic law, continuing the analogy, you will perhaps start as a junior to a senior lawyer in court. You will slowly start building up your own briefs. So here, would you join a senior in international law? Would you join a set of chambers? Which country would you do that in? As an Indian person who's interested in international law, what does that path look like to practice?
right. So one key difference from domestic law here is the number of cases. Since we don't have the huge volume of cases in international law that you would see in any domestic jurisdiction, doing litigation in international disputes only is a bit difficult to do unless you are part of a law firm. And now that's also because if you are doing international disputes all the time, and there are some who exclusively do that, you would need a whole setup of maybe juniors, because there's so much of volume of evidence that comes, one person can't deal with it themselves, right? But let's not going into the law firm setup now. If you're working individually, so then you would probably be doing like a number of people do. For example, in London, you're a barrister, for example, and you deal with domestic cases maybe 80% of the time, but then sometimes you get the chance to work on international disputes. You go before an international forum, right? That you could be doing that part-time international disputes. Or you're an academic, you're a professor in a university, and you teach international law, and part-time, you sometimes a state or a company approaches you and to represent them in a dispute. So part-time you go and litigate a dispute. So it is rare to find
So
unless you're in a
unlike
law firm.
domestic law, the boundaries are more fluid. So there is a
Yes,
lot of crossing over from each of the between each of these categories. And secondly, that it's not necessarily that you're exclusively in a career in international law if you are a litigating lawyer. I mean, you are
yes,
doing domestic matters, but you are known for international law matters, so it could be 20% of your practice. Hmm.
as an example, yes.
As an example.
Some may
Okay,
be
so let's
doing,
come to
yeah,
the law firm. Because obviously, I've always been of the view that international law isn't a monolith. Sometimes we see it as a kind of monolithic, oh, this is international law vis-a-vis domestic law. But there is
mhm,
international trade law, there's international climate law, there's investment arbitration. I mean, there's a whole range of international IP law. There's a whole range
yes,
of sub-disciplines that exist within international law. So take us
yeah.
through the world of law firms working on international law related issues and what careers could look like there.
Okay. So I can't pretend to know about all the kinds of international law that law firms practice. Um, since I'm teaching international dispute settlement, my knowledge is more related to that. So, and that's one of the most common kinds of international law as well. I mean, there could be some where there is no dispute settlement and they are just giving advisory work on compliance with international law, perhaps, but that would be a smaller percentage of work. So if I'm making a guess here, but an educated guess, that most work on international law that law firms do would be dispute settlement with a little bit of advisory work, right?
Right.
So some law firms have just one international dispute resolution department. Some maybe break it up into international arbitration or commercial, even more specifically, commercial arbitration and investment arbitration. That really depends on the firm and the kind of work they have grown into over the years or decades. So that differs from firm to firm. But what I've seen very often, if I'm talking about a young lawyer trying to starting from the ground up, right, in a law firm like this, it is often not easy to specialize in the beginning, saying, as a young lawyer coming in, I want to do commercial disputes only. That may not happen. If you're lucky, it may happen, but very often you got into the dispute resolution stream, and you may get any kind of case in the broader scheme of dispute resolution. the international disputes resolution, of course. So it could be a state-to-state dispute, say before the International Court of Justice, which is of course even rarer. More common is investor-state disputes, but even more common is international commercial arbitration. So you are most likely to, if you get into a law firm like this at the bottom, you're most likely to be assigned a case on international commercial arbitration just because of the volume and the statistics,
No,
So
and this is an important point that you're making, that for young lawyers who are listening, that don't specialize too early. I mean, the specialization will happen over a period of time. And I think we tend to hear this a lot, that I'm interested in international commercial arbitration. We tend to hear this quite often. And I think the clear lesson is that you might do that, but it takes a while to specialize in something. And I think it would be good to build up a vast diversity of experience at the early stages rather than specialize too early. But if I were to go a little bit further, when you said that if you were to join a law firm which has an international dispute resolution department,
Mhm.
typically speaking, as in despite the fact that India is globalizing and we've got larger and larger law firms, as in Indian law firms, typically speaking, don't have international dispute resolution departments to the best of my knowledge. As in, there
Mhm.
are departments that work on arbitration. Some of those arbitrations may be international commercial arbitrations, but I don't think there is the volume to justify a department. There may be firms, as in who have this kind of department, but I wanted to ask you as to where are these firms located typically, and if you could give us a couple of examples as to what kinds of matters, as in they may be on, which are well publicized examples, I think it would be interesting for our listeners.
So you're asking about international law firms which would work on mostly international cases,
That's right.
international laws. Right. So that depends on which are the commercial hubs in the world, right? So some important examples are London, Paris, Geneva to a lesser extent, Washington, D.C., New York. In Asia, it would be Singapore, a really important hub, Singapore. And apparently, I've heard that a lot of India-centric work, if India is involved in the international dispute, happens in Singapore, Hong Kong as well. They're just some examples.
No,
Um,
that's great. What are the, because we tend to see when India, say, is involved in a big dispute of some kind, as in we tend often to see that there are barristers from the UK who India tends to hire to represent them when it comes to a dispute. But
Not
uh,
always.
yeah, and in on many occasions, on many
Mm-hmm.
on many occasions, sometimes we can see that there are professors, there are sometimes senior advocates from the Supreme Court who are also appearing. But are you saying that in each of these cases, as in there will be one of these firms
Mm-hmm.
whose international disputes department will also be working in tandem?
Not necessarily. So India, I think, as far as I'm aware, with specific examples, I can't name the cases, but from what I've heard over the past few years, they sometimes engage an international law firm. Sometimes they engage an Indian law firm, which has, and especially in the context of trade, because there are some Indian lawyers who have experience in trade disputes. So India very often engages in Indian lawyers on that, in Indian law firms. Sometimes it could be an Indian barrister along with foreign professor who has expertise in international law. So I think India keeps changing its strategy. It has like a few options and it keeps going back and forth among these maybe 5 or 6 options as far as I can see.
Okay, interesting that international dispute settlement departments of law firms is another potential career. Let's move to the third one, which is in-house, what you called in-house in an international setting.
Mm,
And the United Nations could being one example. Lawyers who are working on internal UN related matters or external
mm,
facing matters as well. So,
mm,
could you tell us a little bit, perhaps with an example or two, both in terms of what that work entails, and
mm,
two, in terms of how does one get there? This seems to be like one of these things that a lot of people used to say in school, that I want to work in the United Nations, and everyone would
mm.
be proud as to how ambitious this person is. But I wanted to understand from you as to how does one actually go about getting such a job?
Okay. Um, so starting first with the example, I had the good fortune of working as a consultant at the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. It was more than 10 years ago, but I worked there for a few months, and really, unless you've really done that, you cannot give a textbook answer on what it's like. So I worked in the legal affairs division of the UNHCR. So that's like the in-house counsel role. And the senior most, the chief legal advisor to the UNHCR, I worked for him. And so the work at that time, I cannot go into details because of confidentiality issues, but it involved looking at UN law and United Nations constitutive documents concerning the constitution of the UNHCR to figure out something related to, it's really difficult to talk without the details, but this is as far as I can go, but really looking into international law in terms of the constitutive documents of those organizations, and maybe make proposals to, so basically what the UNHCR was trying to do was to make certain propositions to the UN. So let's say the head office in New York, to try to get something done. But because they are a subsidiary body of the UN, they had to make some legal arguments to get what they wanted. So I was helping with that, internal work like that. But there is also a division, while working there, I realized there's also a division, which is the refugee law division. And that works on the substantive law of UNHCR, right?
Right.
Makes policy documents on refugee law, which is what the organization stands for. So I was not doing that. That is not in-house law legal work per se, but that is also an important aspect where they would need lawyers specializing in the subject matter. But there's other kind of work in the in-house role, which is, and I worked on that sometimes as well, which is whenever, and this could get tedious, it could also be very interesting. It's basically it's kind of like an administrative tribunal set up within the UN system. So whenever any staff member of the UN, or specifically for me, the UNHCR, committed any violation of the UN rules, then we had to make a proposal for the UN prosecutor to take up a case against them, things like that. So closer to dispute resolution.
So this is basically service law within the United Nations, as a domestic lawyer might say. But my second part is that how did you
Yeah,
land this? How did you land
right.
this role?
Okay, so for me, it was, I was finishing my master's, and my professor, who was
And
also
that
my
was at the
master's.
Graduate Institute in Geneva.
Yes, master's in international dispute settlement. And my professor, who was a professor at the University of Geneva, she was also my master thesis supervisor. And she wrote to me saying, are you interested in working at the UN? And there is this vacancy. I don't know for how long, but this person, the legal head, he's going to contact you. And I was very excited. As you said, it's some people have these dreams, and my dreams have changed. But at that time, yes, working at the UN, of course, why not? So I jumped at the opportunity, and turned out it was a paid opportunity, not an internship, because very important disclaimer, most internships at the UN are not paid. And it's a big, big barrier for people from developing countries, right? But this was a paid gig. Consultancies are paid. So I jumped at the opportunity, and yes, it was a very enriching few months. And you know why I did not continue? Well, one thing was they kept renewing it month to month. This is a whole topic I can talk about if you're interested. More barriers for people from developing countries. But then I had a job offer from the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. And I was like, this is not even, they were not even giving me a contract, and they renewing it month to month. I've got this great job lined up in Delhi, so I'm leaving. So yeah, I left
That's
the UN.
great. Vidhi 1, UNHCR 0. I like the sound of that. It's always gratifying to hear a nice thing. I'm sure I'll take this to our people and culture team. But I think you make a very important point, and I think we will come to this later in terms of some of the barriers that exist. But what I'm taking away is, do a master's program, do that well,
Impress your
make sure
professor.
you get noticed, and
Yes.
then some doors will hopefully open up for you if there is a little bit of luck on your side. Um,
Mm,
and the fourth career path, which is the one that you're on, which is what a lot of Indian lawyers also end up doing when they are in international law, which
mm.
is academia. And in that, is there any difference in international law, academia, versus working in, I mean, if you were an administrative lawyer or a constitutional lawyer, whether in India or abroad, is it just the same pathway or is there
So
anything
I
specific?
haven't done the others, so I'm not sure. But I know that the pathway to being an international law academic in India and where I am right now is different. So I don't know if
So
it's
tell us
different
about
for,
where you are right now.
right. So here, for even the lowest level of lecturer, what I am right now, requires a PhD at the minimum. And I know that in India, that is not a requirement. You need to pass an exam probably. I don't know
Yes.
if it's still the case, but it used to
Net.
be.
Yeah.
Yes, but you don't need a PhD to start as an assistant professor, etc. But the bare minimum requirement here is a PhD. So that's why, and I wanted to be in academia, and that is why I embarked on the PhD. After that, there's a whole lot of
And
luck because
what did you complete your PhD on for the benefit of our listeners?
mm, yes, it was on the use of scientific experts in international disputes.
Right. So also on
Um,
international dispute resolution,
mhm,
but a more
something
procedural
practical.
question rather than a substantive one.
Yes, yes.
And was there a
Uh,
reason that was a career-based reason for choosing this topic, or was it just interest?
it was interest and funding, to be honest.
Right. It's another elephant in the room, but
Yes.
yes. So you need a PhD to start, but once you start, as in, is it like the United States where it's like a tenured position? Is it a, I'm hoping it's not
Uh,
a month contract
so
again.
a lecturer position is not tenured where I am. Uh, if you get, and I've spoken to a few associate professors. There are very few Indians in this field. I have spoken to some of them, and I've heard that there is something like, so I'm not clear on it because I'm not there. But what I understand is that it's not really tenure because whenever there is, you need to keep proving yourself every few years, and whenever there is a vacancy for a higher level, you need to apply for it. So it's not really tenure. You may have
Right.
a higher chance of getting that promotion if you're there in the institution, but it's not guaranteed. So
Right.
yes, I don't think it's like the US. And there are very few vacancies, especially if you specialize in a certain area of law, even if it's not international dispute settlement, but just international law as a whole. Even there, the vacancies are few and rare. So I think
That's
that's
right.
the main challenge,
But I
getting
think what I
vacancies, but there are
want
more
to,
challenges.
yes, there are more challenges, but I want to emphasize that now you're the second Indian international law academic from Geneva that we are speaking to. We earlier spoke to my
Yes,
former classmate from National Law
yes.
School, Neha
I was
Mishra.
talking about,
So,
yes,
so I don't think there is that much of a glass ceiling as well when it comes to Indian lawyers who really want to make a career in international law. So now that we have covered each of the four
but there's one
pathways
more I forgot.
to
Government,
careers. Yes, there is a fifth. Yes,
government.
government. Explain.
Um, Speaking from the Indian perspective, I am again not clear on this because this started when I'd already moved to Switzerland, but I keep hearing and reading about these things. The Ministry of External Affairs, probably, or is it the Ministry of Law and Justice? But they make call for applications for people, so you don't have to go through the civil service system. You just, if you've been working anywhere in law firms or public sector, just anywhere, you can uh, apply to join as, I think it's called a legal officer, and work in the ministry.
Yes.
And I think
So
that
the
it's, I've
Ministry of
seen the
External
application.
Affairs and the Legal and Treaties Division have some,
Yes,
at least one legal officer, as in who is not from the regular law service cadre.
yes,
Um, so yes, so there are government type roles as well, which
yes,
are, again, I guess there are very few roles, as in they are ad hoc roles,
yes.
but they do exist. Hmm.
Mhm. So I think
Right.
that's also something that you could try for, you could aspire for as an Indian lawyer, because I think the work, the call for applications that I saw, it sounded very interesting. If I was in
So
that
there are
position at that
five
time,
potential pathways, and I think this actually puts it in a nice structure. Five potential pathways for careers in international law. And now I want to ask you as to how does one get there, particularly for law students. Is it that a master's degree in international law is a prerequisite from a foreign university where there is some international law specialization? Would you say, of course, it's a prerequisite for academia where actually more than a master's degree, a PhD is a prerequisite. But for the others, as in, would you say a good master's degree in international law from a university outside India is critical?
It helps. I don't think it's, I won't call it mandatory, but it helps because it opens more doors. It gives you, say you're already in maybe Geneva or London or The Hague or Leiden or wherever you are. You're getting a chance to network and meet people, whether it's your professors or whether it's other people at other events. That definitely helps. But if I look at recruitment or generally how people who have gotten to where they are in these different kinds of institutions, it's not mandatory.
Of course, of course. Of course, I mean, someone can make it through a different channel as well. I
Yes.
mean, there are many ways to be successful. But
Hmm.
you mentioned Geneva, The Hague, and London, and typically you're talking about these because the international law networks are the most dense there.
Paris as well. Yes, I was
Paris.
also
But
thinking
Paris,
about
would there be a
master's
language
programs.
barrier in any of these places?
So what I've understood from people who've gone on to work in Paris, there is at least one English master's program in Paris, maybe more than one. And Paris law firms, for example, there is also uh, there is one UN organization, probably UNESCO. There are a number of these bodies, law firms for sure. They do recruit English speaking people. Now, so this is something, I don't know if it's silly, but I know people who've worked there for a while and then moved out of Paris because, and their reason was they didn't have much of a social life because they could not learn French. So there are
Hmm.
these kinds of superficial,
Softer
maybe.
things which are more important when you're making life decisions.
Yes,
Hmm.
but people have had, but still, it can be a great part of your career. You work there 5 years in a reputable institution. That I know number of Indians who have done that in Paris as well.
So Geneva, The Hague, which is, I mean, the university being Leiden or some of the others in the Netherlands,
Mhm.
London, Paris. Would you add, is there a reason for not adding Singapore and New York to this mix or
No, no.
Washington?
So I'm talking about what is near me because that's what I'm generally used to. But of course, if you ask for more comprehensive answer, there are so many. Singapore, definitely. In fact, my program has a tie-up with National University of Singapore, and some students can complete a double degree program as well. Singapore is great for the academics as well as for the kind of work you can get there. Definitely Singapore.
So it seems to me that what you're saying is that it would help enormously to do a master's degree from one of these places because it will give you access to those networks. And then it's, of course, what you make of it there once you are there.
Yes.
So if there is a student from an Indian law school, an undergraduate law student, as in
Mhm.
who is listening to this and who is fascinated by international law, as many folks are. On an aside, as in, still, when we read CVs that people send for working at Vidhi, particularly when they send it for internships, as in one area of eternal fascination seems to be international law. It's not really clear why. I had also written this in my master's applications that I want to do international law. Look where I have landed up. Well, I'm doing podcasts on international law. So, but the fact is that, but the fact is that international law still has this kind of hold on law students, which has remained for a long period of time. So, for an Indian undergraduate law student who is fascinated by international law, who's listening to this podcast, who wants to do this in some shape or form, what do you think are the next steps apart from the master's degrees? Are there internships? Are there moots? Or there particular courses that they should focus on during their time in law school?
So first of all, you should be clear for the reason for your interest in international law. It should not be, or even for your interest in pursuing a master's. It should not be because I want to spend a year in Geneva or something like that. It
Was
really
that
doesn't
your
help
reason?
in. No, it was this very specific nature of the course actually, because not just international law, but international dispute settlement and the specific professors who teach here. So these are actually the
So
kind
you
of
did
things you
that
should
much
look at.
research before choosing
Yes,
this course that this
yes.
was the specific course. So it was not just international law, it was more granular than that. There were particular professors that you wanted to work with and you targeted, I mean, the professors so that you can FaceTime and access with them. So it was
Mhm.
that level of granularity that went into choosing your course.
Yes. And I encourage this kind of research from anyone, because a master's degree is a really big commitment, especially if it's abroad. From an Indian perspective, you may get a scholarship, you may get a full scholarship, you may get a partial scholarship, you may not get a scholarship, and maybe if you can afford it through a loan or something else. So, given all these circumstances, you should have a really, really good reason for choosing to pursue that master's program. And taking a step back to what you were asking earlier, you can already start bolstering your application while you are in law school. Moot courts, of course, there are moot courts on international law within India. There are too many to name. There's the NLS International Arbitration Moot. There is the Government Law College International, DM Harish Moot.
Yes.
There's one in GNLU, and I'm sure there are more that I am not keeping track of. That are more recent. Internationally, there's the Philip C. Jessup International Law Moot. So whatever you do and to whatever level you reach, you may just maybe participate in the nationals and not make it beyond, or in the other moves you just make it to the preliminary rounds. But it doesn't matter, because you have done the research, you've written a memorial, you've practiced your oral arguments, that has already taken you a few steps further in your knowledge of international law. You have played with international law, you've analyzed it, you've read some more than what your courses teach you. So I think moot court is very important that way. It really helps you, because you can't really do your internship in international law. You can't just walk to the next law firm near you and do it while in India. So this way moot courts are really helpful. And then of course, once you do moot courts and you're open, moot courts generally are about these controversial topics, right? So then you've opened your eyes to some areas of international law that could do with some more research. Then you write papers, and it at this stage, I mean, you can always aim for the best journals and all that, but it doesn't matter where you publish. You publish something, then somebody gets to read it, right? Just try to publish somewhere. That even, I mean, that minimum threshold is enough. Of course, once you've published a little bit, you can always try to publish in better places, but the goal is publish a little bit. You could always try to find some, depending on your ability and what you can access, you can try to find some online courses that gives you some specialized knowledge on certain aspect of something. It looks good on a CV that, okay, I have also studied it. It wasn't offered in my university, but I've taken the effort to study this online or go somewhere in a summer school and do this. So all of these things matter and bolster your CV, apart from, say, I got the highest grade in international law in my university, things like that.
No, I think this is great practical advice as to why you should look at doing moots, because it's not just doing the moot itself. It's a virtuous cycle that you can get into, get more interested in the issue, get a deeper understanding of it, write more on the issue, and all of this adds to building your CV for that master's or for a future job application. So this is actually really good practical advice. Before we end, I'll just turn to your career as an international lawyer, and what is it that makes you want to go back every day and teach international law and research international law? What is it that motivates you? And if there is any particular moment or episode in your career in international law that you still remember as something that's truly special.
So what makes me go back every day? There's two aspects of it. One aspect is international law, but the other aspect is teaching. I love teaching. So international law, I got interested in it way back in, I think, second year, when it was a compulsory subject for me in law school. And what I think I find interesting is its inherent difference from municipal law, that there is so much of fluidity and so much depends on the consent of these certain entities, whether states or other entities. And it's an entirely different scheme in which it works from domestic law. That's what interests me. And why I go back every day to teach is because I love teaching. And this is why I was so happy to talk to you today on careers in international law, because I spend maybe half my time doing that as well with the students. So it's the joy of, sharing what I already know. And also, I also get to learn from the students. It's not a one-way street. So it's very interesting, not just to see how students react to the new knowledge they are gaining, but also to learn from them every day. So that's what keeps inspiring me. And any particular instance, I think, no, what I like about my career so far is that I have had the opportunity to do a number of different things, not just Vidhi, and keeping that aside, I've worked in a UN organization. I've actually worked in another one. It's a joint body between the UN and the World Trade Organization called the International Trade Center, where my work was not dispute resolution, but it was a lot of negotiating agreements between the International Trade Center and other entities. I've also briefly done an internship for the International Law Commission, and that really stood out for me, because I was actually seeing it's not like law is being made there, because their job is to codify and progressively develop international law. But there you see some of the greatest legal minds of the world get together and argue. They're trying to draft a document, some draft articles or some draft treaty, and they are arguing over one and here or a comma there, and how it can have repercussions for the sentence and what it means. I think if you not one highlight, but that moment, that 1 month I spent there, that was really special watching that happen. And it kind of informs my thinking in the after that in the future.
No, I think
But
that's
I don't
great.
know if
I
you have
think
the time, but I
I
really
do.
want to talk about barriers to getting where we are for Indians, because I think
Yes,
about that
please
a
do.
lot.
And how we overcome them. Yeah.
Overcoming is hard, but especially in Geneva, this is not the same in London, Paris. I'm talking about immigration laws. Of course, it differs from country to country. Um, and in Switzerland, they have a system where they give priority to Swiss applicants to any job, and any company, any employer is required to do that. Not the UN, not any international organization, but say law firms are also bound by it. Even if they're not Swiss law firms, if it's a Swiss branch of a foreign law firm, they are bound by
So
it. So they give
Singapore has a
priority.
similar requirement. Yeah.
So they give priority to Swiss applicants. If not Swiss, they give priority to EU applicants. And then come third country applicants. So as an Indian, you have to overcome these barriers. If they love your CV, they've loved your work, but they cannot take all this trouble to hire you, because they have to justify that you have, pun not intended, they have to justify that you have some kind of skills that none of the other applicants have. Because I remember once, to hire a friend I have here in Geneva who can speak Hindi, it's not his native language. To hire him, they had put out an application saying that they need someone Hindi speaking,
So they
because they
must
had to.
love you enough, basically, to overcome these barriers.
Yes, yes. Uh, Paris, I believe it is easier because the number of Indians have been hired in Paris. I'm not sure of the French law on the matter. London, I know certain firms, bigger firms, will take you, but certain smaller ones will say, no, you have to be able to get the right to work yourself. Academia, I know in Geneva, if they want to hire you as a professor or assistant professor, it doesn't matter. They will take you. Then your provenance doesn't matter, whether you come from India or wherever else. If they want to hire you as a professor of any kind, you're in. So that is an exception. But of course, there's also the financial barriers. If you're coming in and, as I said, internships are not paid, then you have to somehow figure out how to manage to sustain yourself in a city like Geneva or New York or Vienna. These are the hubs of the UN, where it's quite expensive to manage daily expenses and they will not pay you. So there are financial barriers, there are immigration law barriers that you need to think of. And of course, master's program, the fees, but there are a lot of scholarships to help you with that as well.
So just before we end, as in since you touched upon scholarships, as in this generally scholarships to work to further master's program or specifically ones on international law?
No, as far as I know, there are some scholarships which are specific to countries. There are UK government scholarships, Swiss government scholarships, etc. Then there are specific programs or specific institutes or universities. They offer scholarships as well. And a lot of them have various criteria. Some may just be need-based scholarship. Some are, some say, okay, we will only give scholarships to Greek students, or various criteria for scholarships. But there are a number, and I believe there are an increasing number of scholarships because they want to reduce the barriers to education, I guess. At least what the ones, the institutes that I know of, I see more and more scholarships these days.
So I think this is another matter for students to research, as in apart from
Yes.
the courses that they want to do and the professors that they want to do it with, also the scholarships that are on offer, because it's actually quite encouraging that there are scholarships. It's just about
Yeah.
being able to find them and also, of course, putting up a competitive application. And
Yes.
while there are, of course, barriers, as in financial, immigration, and so on, uh, really the task for international lawyers couldn't be more urgent than it is today. We have a
Mhm.
world order that is being completely upended, both when it comes to matters in relation to armed conflict, as well as where it comes to matters in relation to international trade. So, Rukmini, last word to you. You see the world in this state of seeming disarray, particularly where international law remains quite silent, as there are atrocities being committed, as well as the kind of trade order that we know being show, slowly but almost certainly upended. So, last word to you. Where do you see this going, and what role do you see international lawyers having to play at this time?
So as I said earlier, international law depends so much on the actors involved because it depends so much on their consent. So how we proceed will depend on the what is made of international law by their subjects. The subjects make the law what it is, unlike in municipal domestic law. So we international lawyers will just have to mold what is given to us. The system will be changing, and that's the nature of international law, an ever-changing system. And we will have to work with what tools there are, and I'm sure we can make it work, whatever tools are presented to us.
That's a good note of optimism to end this episode on. Thank you very much, Rukmini. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, to listen to you, and interact with you. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining
Argo.
us and for all the wonderful work that you've been doing. Thank you. And once again,
Thank,
uh,
thank you, Argo. It's been a pleasure.